My name is Sophia, and on a cold December night in 2022, I had an experience that I can't explain, but I know in my heart was a warning, one that I believe came straight from Jesus. If you're a parent or someone who cares about the younger generation, please listen carefully to what I'm about to share. Before that night, I didn't believe in these things. I wasn't aware of what was really happening. But now I feel compelled to speak out to warn as many people as I can. And I want to hear from you, whether you agree, disagree, or just want to share your thoughts on this vision. Please comment below. It all started on a regular Friday evening. I was lying on the couch in our living room, mindlessly scrolling through my phone. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, one video after another. The hours slipped by, unnoticed, as I fed myself a constant stream of content. Didn't seem important, but I couldn't stop. I glanced at the clock and realized my parents had gone to bed. My brothers and sisters were in their rooms. I was alone except for the glow of my screen. Suddenly, I felt lightheaded. The room seemed to spin around me. First, I thought I might just be dehydrated or maybe my blood sugar was low. I told myself I'd get up to drink some water, but before I could move, everything went black. The next thing I knew, I wasn't in my living room anymore. I was above my body, floating. There I was, slumped over on the couch, my phone still glowing in my hand. Panic set in. Was I dead? What was going on? I tried to cry out, but no sound came. And then the darkness was pierced by a blinding light. It wasn't just light, it was something more. Presence. I turned, and there he was. Jesus. He didn't look like the pictures I'd seen in church or the ones in Sunday school books. He was more than that, radiant, powerful, more real than anything I'd ever known. His presence wasn't just light. It was love, authority, and truth all wrapped in one. I wanted to fall to my knees, but I couldn't move. "Come," he said, extending his hand toward me. His voice was calm but carried an urgency, a weight that left no room for doubt. Without hesitation, I reached out and took his hand. The moment I did, the room I was in disappeared, and we were standing in a void. Didn't feel empty, though. Everywhere I looked, there were glowing screens, phones, tablets, computers, TVs, even VR headsets, hovering in midair. These weren't just devices. They were alive, pulsating with something dark, something sinister. I could see faces staring at me from these screens, millions of faces, but their eyes were blank. Hypnotized. Lost. Jesus looked at me and gestured toward the screens. "This is the battlefield," he said, his voice filled with both sorrow and urgency. "The enemy has made this his weapon against your generation, millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha. He knows your potential. He knows what you could do for my kingdom. And so, he is working to destroy you." I didn't understand. "But it's just technology," I said. "It's just entertainment." Jesus turned to me, and his eyes held a sadness I can't describe. "It started that way," he said. "But what you see as harmless is far from it. The enemy uses these screens to enslave hearts, minds, and souls. Technology was meant to be a tool, but it has become a trap." I looked closer at the screens, and that's when I saw them. Chains. Chains that extended from each screen, wrapping around people's wrists, necks, and hearts. Some people were shackled so tightly they couldn't move. Each chain had a word written on it: comparison, anxiety, lust, distraction, pride, envy. The words burned into my mind. "They don't even know they're chained," I whispered. "That's the enemy's greatest trick," Jesus replied. "To enslave them without their knowledge." Suddenly, the screens turned red, flames flickering around the edges. And then I saw a symbol, terrifying and unnatural, glowing on every screen. But it wasn't just on the devices. It began appearing on people's foreheads and hands, as though being burned into their skin. "What is that?" I asked, my voice trembling. Jesus looked at me, his expression grave. "It's not yet the mark of the beast," he said, "but it is conditioning them to accept it. The enemy is preparing their hearts to worship him, not me. He is training them to value convenience, approval, and instant gratification above all else. When the time comes, they will accept the mark without question." I couldn't breathe. My mind raced, thinking about how many hours I had spent on my phone, how many times I had felt worthless because of what I saw online, the fights I'd had with my parents when they told me to put my phone down. I'd always thought they were overreacting. Now I wasn't so sure. The scene shifted, and I found myself standing in the middle of a battlefield. It wasn't a physical war zone, though. It was a war between generations. Parents, grandparents, children, teens, they were all on opposite sides. The older generations were yelling at the younger ones, accusing them of being lazy, selfish, and addicted. The younger ones were yelling back, blaming their parents for not understanding or for creating the problems they were now facing. Meanwhile, the enemy stood in the shadows, laughing, feeding the division. "They are supposed to be united," Jesus said, his voice thick with sadness. "But the enemy has turned them against each other. The older generations must wake up and see that their children and grandchildren are under attack. They must fight for them, not against them." I asked, "How? What can they do?" "They must pray," Jesus said. "They must teach my word. They must set an example by putting me above all else, even their own distractions." Many of them have been lulled to sleep by the same devices. I looked around and saw it, older people just like the younger ones glued to their phones, scrolling through news, playing games, while their children wandered deeper into darkness. The next scene broke my heart. It was a church service, but not like any church I had ever known. The sanctuary was full of people, but most weren't paying attention. Some were scrolling through their phones during worship. Others were taking selfies during the sermon. Pastor was preaching with passion, but his words seemed to fall on deaf ears. The glow of the screens was overwhelming, drowning out the presence of God. "This is my house," Jesus said, his voice trembling with both anger and sorrow. "But it has become a marketplace for distractions. My people no longer seek me with their whole hearts. They seek entertainment, validation, and convenience." I wanted to scream, to shake everyone awake. But I couldn't. I turned to Jesus, desperate. "What can I do? I'm just a kid." Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder and his eyes met mine. "You are more than you think you are," he said. "You are my messenger. I have chosen you to warn them, not just your generation, but all generations. But they won't listen. They'll think I'm crazy," I said, tears streaming down my face. "They rejected me too," he said. "But some will hear, and their eyes will be opened. Speak boldly. Tell them what you have seen. Warn them that the time is short." And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't stay silent. In an instant, I was back in my living room. My heart was pounding. Tears were still on my face. My phone was still in my hand, but now it felt different. Cold, heavy, sinister. I threw it across the room and fell to my knees. I cried out to God like I had never prayed before. I prayed for my friends, my family, my generation, and even for the older generations. I prayed for the courage to share what I had seen. If you're reading this, I believe it's because Jesus wants you to hear this warning. This isn't just about kids and their phones. It's about all of us. The enemy is using technology to distract, divide, and destroy. He's conditioning us to accept what's coming. If we don't wake up, it will be too late. Parents, grandparents, older friends, your role is vital. Pray for your children. Talk to them about this. Set an example by putting your own devices down and seeking God first. And to my generation, don't let the enemy steal your soul through a screen. Seek Jesus. Read His Word. Find your worth in Him, not in likes, comments, or followers. Time is short. The choice is yours.